The Anderson family loved their golden retriever Buddy, but his one peculiar habit drove them to distraction. For a solid year, come rain or shine, Buddy would go to the same spot in the backyard, right under the old oak tree, and dig. He wasn't burying a bone or chasing a mole, it was a methodical, obsessive excavation. He would dig for an hour, pause, look at the hole with a strange intensity, and then wander off, only to return the next day and start all over again. The hole was now a significant crater. Mark Anderson had filled it in half a dozen times, only for Buddy to patiently, diligently dig it right back out. They'd had vets check him for behavioral issues. They were told it was likely just a quirk. "He's a happy, healthy dog otherwise," Mark would say to his wife Jenny. "But this digging, it's like he's on a mission." Jenny worried it was a sign of anxiety, a way for Buddy to cope with something they didn't understand. Their two children, 12-year-old Chloe and 10-year-old Sam, had their own theories. Sam thought he was digging for pirate treasure. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, thought he could smell an old septic tank. But no explanation seemed to fit the dog's relentless, almost solemn dedication to this one patch of earth. One sweltering August afternoon, on the 1-year anniversary of the digging's start, something changed. Buddy was digging with more fervor than ever before, sending dirt flying. Suddenly he stopped and let out a sharp bark. Not his usual playful yap, but a bark of discovery. He began pawing at something in the bottom of the hole, whining with excitement. Mark, who had been watching from the porch with a sigh, put down his coffee and walked over, expecting to find a rock or an old root. "What is it this time, you nut?" he said, peering into the hole. But this time, it wasn't a rock. Sticking out of the dark soil was the corner of a metal box, green with age and corrosion. A jolt of adrenaline shot through Mark. He called for the rest of the family. Together, with shovels and trembling hands, they carefully unearthed the object. It was a rusty, padlocked metal chest, about the size of a shoebox. Buddy sat nearby, panting happily, his tail thumping against the ground as if to say, "Finally? You're welcome." The lock was too rusted to pick, so Mark got a pair of bolt cutters from the garage. With a loud snap, the lock broke. The family gathered around as Mark slowly, reverently, lifted the heavy lid. A musty smell of old paper and damp earth wafted out. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was not pirate treasure, but a collection of letters, a small leather-bound journal, and a single sepia-toned photograph. The photograph showed a young man in a World War II soldier's uniform, his arm around a smiling young woman. They were standing in front of the very same oak tree in their backyard, though it was much smaller then. Jenny carefully picked up the journal. The first page read, "Property of Thomas Anderson." Mark's breath caught in his throat. Thomas Anderson was his grandfather. He had died in the war, a family hero he'd never met. His grandmother had rarely spoken of him, the pain too great. The family had lived in this house for generations, but they had never known this existed. They spent the rest of the afternoon reading the journal and the letters. They were love letters, written between his grandfather, Thomas, and his grandmother, Eleanor, while he was away at war. They were filled with hope, with dreams of the future, of the family they would have in this very house. The journal was his grandfather's, chronicling his experiences, not of battle, but of the quiet moments in between, the friendships, the fear, and his undying love for the woman waiting for him at home. The final entry was dated the day before he was killed in action. He wrote of his plan to bury this time capsule when he returned, a treasure for his future children and grandchildren to find. "Let them know," he wrote, "that in the darkest of times, love was our light. Let them know I was here." But he never came home. The box was never buried by him. The final letter in the pile explained why. It was from his grandfather's best friend, a man named David. He wrote to Eleanor after Thomas's death, explaining that Thomas had given him the box before his final mission. "If I don't make it back," Thomas had told him, "bury this for me, under our oak tree, so a part of me will always be home." David had fulfilled his friend's final wish, burying the box in secret a year after the war ended, wanting to spare the grieving widow any more pain. He had moved away shortly after, and the secret was buried with him. The Andersons sat in silence, the weight of a history they never knew settling upon them. Mark looked at the photo of the young man with his own surname, who had walked this same land and dreamed under this same tree. He felt an overwhelming connection to the grandfather he'd only known through stories. These letters and this journal were not just objects, they were his grandfather's soul, a piece of his legacy returned to them. And it was all because of Buddy. How could the dog have known? There was no logical explanation. He couldn't have smelled paper and ink buried 3 feet deep for over 70 years. It was as if he had sensed the deep lingering emotion in that spot. The love, the hope, the loss. He had felt the presence of a story that needed to be told and had taken it upon himself to unearth it. That evening, the family reburied the box, adding a new photo of themselves and Buddy, and a letter of their own for a future generation. The hole was finally filled for good. Buddy never dug there again. His mission was complete. He was no longer just a family pet. He was a guardian of their history, a bridge to a past they thought was lost forever. Sometimes, the deepest connections are not bound by time or logic, but by a loyalty that can feel a story buried deep within the earth.